My name is Michael Thomsen. I grew up in Denmark, but I lived all my adult life in Australia. I currently live in Tasmania, the island south of the mainland Australia, and it's a very beautiful place. I've been a herbalist and naturopath for nearly 40 years. I also have a PhD in medical sciences from the University of Sydney. And my biggest claim to fame is the phytotherapy desk reference, which is both a book for students and practitioners of herbal medicine and also an online application with herb-drug interactions and research, as well as traditional information about herbal medicine. So that's the main focus of my work now, is to update the book and the application.
Hi there, Michael. So let's start with a bit about the history about St. John's wort. He's been around for a long time, and saw a paper mentioned that it has been used back in ancient Greece for some nervous disease as well. So how was it used in different cultures in the past? And just it's fascinating to think about.
Yeah, it is actually incredible how much information that they have. I think they had very good powers of observation because they didn't use clinical trials, they didn't use modern science. They just, over the millennia, observed what happened when animals and then later people took these or ate these herbs and made herbal teas and so on. I think that body of knowledge that's behind traditional herbal medicine is quite phenomenal.
Mhm.
St. John's wort is a native to Europe, and it's named after St. John the Baptist because it blooms around the festival that bears his name. I think that's in June in Europe. So that's why it's called St. John's wort. The botanical name is Hypericum perforatum, and it was described by Hippocrates and later Dioscorides. These are Greek botanists and herbalists, and they described the medicinal uses over 2,000 years ago. So I guess we have all that period leading up to that, maybe thousands of years of talking about it, and then those guys starting to write it all down over 2,000 years ago. So it goes back a very long time. And it's described in older herbal textbooks as a nervine. And a nervine is not really a medical term anymore, but a nervine, as you can imagine, sounds like it's something for the nervous system. And a nervine is something that is soothing or relaxing to the nervous system. So you can already start to understand that the indications for this is somebody who's got a frazzled nervous system. Maybe that's stress or anxiety. And in modern time, they've also discovered that it might be useful for mild to moderate depression. Now, there's a lot of clinical trials on depression and anxiety and stress, but also for menopause. It's one of the most highly researched herbal medicines that we have.
So as you mentioned, it's been used for stress relief and also people have anxiety. So it's a herb for various illnesses. So what else are main conditions or issues
Yeah, I
people?
just want to say about the depression. I think it's nice to keep reminding oneself that it's a nervine. It's for stress and anxiety as well as depression, because if you ask Dr. Google or now an AI bot, they probably mostly will talk about depression because that's been the main research focus. But I think it's important that this is a herb that is quite mild to take and doesn't have any kind of adverse effects. Like you take it, it's a slow acting, it takes several weeks to take effect in terms of its effect on depression and so on. So it's not a very dramatic herb like that. And I think it's important that we bear in mind that it's not just depression that is useful for, but there's sort of nervous tension and stress and anxiety as well. Topically, it's also the extract and also this beautiful red oil that can be extracted out of the flowers that can be used for skin disorders, for burns, and for healing wounds and reducing scar tissue and so on. So it has many properties. And another interesting fact is that it's also a photosensitizer. And it can be used for a completely different sort of indication, which is antiviral, and it can also kill excess cells. So it can be used in cancer, and it can be used also for a condition called psoriasis, where there's an excess production of skin cells that builds up in plaque. You can actually apply hypericum extract or the active compound called hypericin directly onto this plaque and let it absorb into the tissue for a few hours. And then you can use a lamp to activate the compound, and it will kill off those excessive cells in cancer or in psoriasis. So that whole process of being a photosensitizer means that if you take a big dose of St. John's wort and it's very high in hypericin, and you go out in the sun and it comes down, it actually activates hypericin. And that can be used in medicine, but conversely can also cause some nerve damage and nerve irritation that can be quite severe as well.
Oh,
And in
wow.
fact, St. John's wort is a weed in Australia. So
Hmm.
it grows in the paddocks around in certain areas, especially around Victoria.
Hmm.
And when the cows eat excessive amounts of this weed, I guess they're grazing in the grass and they eat some of this hypericum, they can actually also have a high level of these photosensitizing effects,
Hmm.
and it can cause a blistering skin disease in the cows.
Oh, wow.
So it's not a bad thing. It is a bad thing, but you have to be careful with the dosage and the extract preparation. A few years ago, I worked for a company where we thought that the higher the hypericin, the better. We had not set a high limit for the hypericin in the extract. And
Hmm.
they used, at one time, they used St. John's wort that had been gathered on the fields in Victoria.
Hmm.
And they produced a really fantastic extract, but it was very high in hypericin. There were some people who ended up in a hospital because of this photosensitizing effects. It means that they can't go outside for several weeks while they're recovering from this side effect of St. John's wort. The other issue is another compound, so not hypericin, but hyperforin. And
Hmm.
hyperforin is an active compound as well, although it's not the only active compound. Again, as you mentioned in some of the other videos, it's often that we have a marker compound that is used in manufacturing to ensure a quality extract, but they're not necessarily the only active compound. We most often consider the whole herb to be the active compound or the active principle, and therefore the extract should also be a whole herb extract. And the same thing with St. John's wort. There are flavonoids and all kinds of other compounds in there, and it's this totality of those compounds that have the effect. But this particular one called hyperforin is very important because going back a couple of decades, there were some companies in Europe that started to make a St. John's wort product very high in this compound hyperforin.
Hmm.
I guess they were trying to differentiate themselves in the marketplace that they could sell an extract that was different from the other companies. But the result was actually that we had an increase in adverse drug interactions. In that compound can speed up the metabolism of medicines. So if you're combining St. John's wort, an extract or product very high in hyperforin, you have an increased risk of drug interactions. So therefore, a general recommendation really is to select or choose a St. John's wort product that is low in hyperforin.
Hmm.
And that way it will still work for the indications, but it will be a very little risk of drug interaction. Now, this is not a very well-known fact because it's complex. And unless the company has stated that their product is low in hyperforin, the consumers would not know that it's low in hyperforin. So that's one of the things I'm concerned about. I think the truth in marketing and the truth in labeling. And it would be very useful if all St. John's wort products had a label or had included on the label the level of hyperforin. But there are some extracts that we know are low in hyperforin. So the normal liquid extracts, these tinctures that we use in traditional herbal medicine, they are naturally low in hyperforin. It's also important that the flowering plants of the St. John's wort is harvested in full flower and not too early, because then when they're in full flower, they are low in hyperforin anyway. So if you stick to the traditional information of harvesting and extracting the St. John's wort flower, then it's a much safer extract. And then in terms of modern science, there's a company in Europe called Zeller, and they produced a St. John's wort extract that is very low in hyperforin, and they've shown it is working very well as an antidepressant, and yet it has no drug interaction. So it's a very safe choice to make if you are taking St. John's wort with some medical drugs.
All right. Thanks so much, Michael, for guiding us into the details about those active components within this herb as well.